Ladies and gentlemen, for years there's been debates, fights, wars over which board game is the best. And as the Archduck, I have the only opinion that matters. So sit back and let a true board game, a hobbyist, tell you what the best games are, in order. We'll be going bottom to top to decipher what makes a game good. Bear with me, we kind of need to get the bad out of the way to understand what makes the good. Starting off with F tier are games I don't enjoy and would not recommend you get. Comancheria, a solitaire game about playing as a Native American tribe through colonial history. This is not going to go over well, but I stand by my placement. This game's rulebook is ridiculously hard to follow, and I have tried to get a game off the ground multiple times. The rulebook should be understandable to the player. That's the most important part of the game. And this one fails horribly at that standard. I shouldn't have to go risk watching a 30-minute video to maybe know how to play. F tier for its horrible rulebook. Call to Adventure, where you roll dice to complete challenges to get more dice, victory points, and sidekicks. It's not the mechanics that make this game dull. Plenty of other dice collectors exist that I enjoy. It's that the game is far too repetitive and there's little interaction with the other players. It's just not that good. Founding Fathers. In this game, you play out delegates to help create the U.S. Constitution and gain victory points for being more instrumental than others in its creation. What makes this game feel bad is the lack of action economy. You get one play each turn, you have 3 cards in your hand, and if you draw multiple of the same state, you get to play them all at once for more VPs. Yeah, no one at the table really enjoyed this one. We'll get back to it July 4th of next year, though. We are going to play it again, and maybe, who knows? Maybe it'll end up in D tier. Speaking of D tier, on to D tier, where there's a charm about these deeply flawed games, but I'd never recommend getting them. Mapmaker. It's the square game. Connect the squares for points. But you're trying to gerrymander the squares. I wanted to put this in F tier, but I can't hate the game. There's some sort of joy about the advanced square game. There's a lot of negotiation in a 4-player game too, which helps it. Marvel Mayhem. This is a card game battler where you're seeking to bring the health of the other players to 0 with your character deck. This game is awful and unbalanced at 2 players, but you can deal with that using the classic board game balance of having 3 or more competitors. At 3 or more competitors, it becomes a turtle game until someone brings out their combo. And the tension of the slow build-up until everyone starts attacking, and some of the interesting special cards can make this game flawed but fun. Just like a Marvel movie. Star Wars Epic Duels. Another game where you use your character's deck of cards to fight to the last man standing. Except this one has a board you can move around, and much more health. This game's fun. Except it's incredibly unbalanced. Even in free-for-alls. Say your character relies on their sidekick. The opponent can have cards that deal a lot of direct damage to your sidekick. And that's leaving out the sheer power of certain decks. Still, in spite of all that, Epic Duels is fun to play. One day I'll get the egregious 6v6 or 12 for all game. That would be hilarious. That is my goal. If only this were properly balanced, then it would be truly amazing. Axis and Allies, 1941. The classic formula of Axis and Allies, or as I like to call it, advanced Risk, in a form that's meant to be simple and quick for beginners. On gameplay alone, this game should be C tier. It's a lesser form of a lot of the other Axis and Allies games. But the flaw of this game is instead the audience. Who is this game for? Beginners don't understand this game, and people who aren't beginners might as well break out any other board game, because this isn't for them. I don't know who am I supposed to play this board game with, and that makes it pretty bad. Risk, the classic attack, roll dice, and hide in Australia strategy game. I don't know, it's Risk. What more do I say? It's good at forcing offense with the troop cards and having 3 or more players make diplomatic talks a wild time. However, it goes into D tier for taking far too long, for being a game where you just move your troops and attack with dice. Either be shorter or have more variety. Risk as it stands is not the greatest game. But come on, it's family board game night. You can't hate it. Ion. This is a party game where you try to get rid of your hand by matching your card to the last one played. It's a light game that trends towards forcing other players to draw cards, and takes a long time because of that. By all means, it should be at the bottom of D tier. What could possibly... My le bomb! It killed people? The bomb is a card that removes itself and the next player from the game after it's played. This card is absolutely hilarious. In a wild twist of fate, I've seen the player that plays the bomb end up getting blown up by it. And since this game is just something to do while chatting, getting out isn't awful like other games. In conclusion, it's incredibly memorable by a single card. And that's why it belongs at D tier. That is what D tier is all about. That beauty in a flawed game. C tier, I don't mind playing these games, but they're kind of mid. I wouldn't, maybe if you really want it. Stratego, a game about bluffs and misleading your opponents as your armies are not known to each other. Solid game with a strong mechanic of varying soldier strengths that can make losing each one add up if you don't make them count. The only drawback is that Stratego will get sluggish. Especially late game. Oh boy, does this game get sluggish, guys. Scrabble, the games where you use tiles to spell out words to get points. I can't find anything to dislike about it, nor anything to sing its praises about. It's just there. The board game of all time. Munchkin, kick down the door, fight the monsters for levels, and get treasure. First to level 10 wins. This game is weird. It feels like it wants you to take the competition seriously. But at the same time, the level 9 player who steamrolled all game draws potted plant and wins. Munchkin is alright. I'll play. But I'm never hyped that it's Munchkin night. Richard the Lionheart. In this 2-team game, your aim is to add up the slowly revealing Crusade deck to either destroy Richard's rule or strengthen it. You also have secret edicts that grant BP after the game ends if you fulfill them. Only one player on the winning team can win, which makes this a very interesting, semi-cooperative game. This game, however, feels like it should have more to it. Like there should be more cards to play that interact with the game state. A decent game as it is, though. Santorini. Santorini is a short game where you move and build each turn, seeking to get one of your workers to the 3rd floor. The game's standout quality is that each player is assigned a power that changes up how the game is played slightly, so that the gameplay is dealing with the power matchup. Even so, this game can really only handle a few rounds before feeling stale. Okay to bring out every once in a while for a quick burst, but nothing I can really justify for putting it any higher on the list. Flux! The beauty of cards in games is that rule exceptions and changes throughout the game can be implemented through cards instead of having them clutter up a rulebook. Flux takes this concept to its logical extreme. You start with the basic rule, which is a card, and some of the cards that you will play will also change up the rules or set up the goal that you win if you meet. Now, what puts it in C tier is simply that its enjoyability is, well, in flux. Because everything's changed by the cards you play, sometimes the game feels really good, other times it is awful. If you want to gamble your enjoyment away, choose Flux. B tier. Now we're getting to the good stuff. I recommend them if they pique your interest. Near and Far. This game is a mix of a board game and tabletop RPG. Pretty fun. Has a starter map and a 10-map campaign, but also has an option to do its maps standalone or with randomized quests. This game goes into D tier by being a solid game, but there's a lot of competition. But there's a lot of competition in the tabletop RPG front from games that are, quite frankly, better. Mario the Card Game.
What is this game doing here?
In the Mario Kart game, you are dealt level cards with a coin amount on them, and take turns going around the table, choosing whether to swap them or not. At the end of the round, everyone reveals, and the player with the lowest amount loses a life. 3 lives and you're out. Last man wins. Like Ion, this is a very light game where you chat while playing, so that makes the eliminations tolerable. Unlike Ion, the speed rounds and, for a light game, the level of bluffs, make this highly enjoyable. Every table I have played this at enjoys it, and that is a seal of approval for any board game. It's surprisingly good for a chill game, but I wouldn't put it high. I might be singing its praises, but it's not some amazing standout game. The castles, which if you draw them you just free for a round, can be very annoying, for example. Coup! Quick! Everyone call Duke! This is an information gathering and bluffing game. There's 5 rolls and 2 cards you get. So if you know what you can get away with, you can succeed very well. while also stopping others from claiming false roles. Also, you gotta stop yourself from getting ganged up on. Tricky game to navigate, and that's kind of what makes it fun. Play cards to place cubes, get power in the first or second place government for BPs, and win. This is everything Founding Fathers wants to be. 7-card hand gives you more options than 3. You can keep your strongest for the next round by placing them out in front of you for a stronger board state. There are also various events to play that mess with your opponents, like removing their cubes or removing one of the cards they're trying to keep for the next round. However, above and beyond all of this, the best part of Liberte is through the comeback mechanic. In most games with VP, if you fall behind, you've lost. Which in a serious game, compared to some of the more casual ones we've been talking about, is a very miserable situation, as you're sitting there for maybe 30 minutes as people are taking the game seriously, but you're out of it, and you're just there in spirit. However, in Liberte, there are 2 auto wins which are a little difficult to activate, made to prevent a Morbius sweep. And that's the real beauty of this game. Last place still has a path to reach for. However, I did compare this to Founding Fathers for a reason. The action economy still feels too slow. Enjoy B tier, bozo. 13 days. Twilight struggle, but it's the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you can finish in an hour. You get 3 agendas that are known to the other player and secretly pick them. Very solid game, lots of misdirection in play. Victory points can't go above 5 per one side, which helps prevent the Morbius sweep. Also, you can lose by triggering nuclear war, which can be hilarious, because I once triggered a nuclear war with my opponent at the same time as he did, which is the only way to draw. This obviously gets outclassed by Twilight Struggle, which I don't own, so it's not on this list. A tier. These are great games. Amazing, some might say. I'd recommend picking these up if you're looking for some new ones to get. Unmatched. A card game battler where you're trying to reduce your opponent's health to 0 while using your deck and moving around on the map. This is literally a better balanced Star Wars Epic Duels. I mean it literally, too. The entire backstory of this game was to take the fundamentals of Epic Duels and make it into a good game. They succeeded, and really made it their own thing while doing so. This game is snappy, flows well, and is relatively balanced. Unlike most games, the balance is worse, and it feels worse in a free-for-all. The decks are designed for 1v1s, and you take damage once you exhaust your draw. The problem is once again in the balance, but it's less so. For example, Sherlock Holmes has a 3 defense card in a game where the highest attacks are roughly 4 and 5, where if you guess the printed number on the opponent's attack, it makes it 0 and cancels the effects. So if you just play that card and guess 4 or 5, the odds are insanely high that you just don't take damage. That card should not be 3 defense, and it really irritates me that it is. Small World, a land too small for all the players trying to settle it. If I asked most board gamers if they knew Small World, the answer is yes. It's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. The game is fun, there's a lot of choices about which is the strongest race, how to create a board state where it costs more than it's worth to attack you, and how to keep the target off your back before the other players dogpile you for being in the lead. It's a solid game. The games only get more solid from here. Diplomacy. What if we lived in a world without luck, where the hands that will stab you today help you later, tomorrow? Diplomacy is a crazy game. You write orders to push your troops forward, capturing supply to create more troops. You'll need to rely on an ally at some point for help, and that's where the name of the game really comes in. Alliances and backstabbing are very common here, with the game often ending in only a 2 or 3 way draw, only 2 or 3 players win. While you act like friends with all 6 other players from the start. It's very intense and very lengthy, but it's also very fun to play and scheme with. Solid top of A tier. It would be S if the backstabs didn't make people never want to play it again. Cosmic Encounters, first to 5 planets, wins in this game of galactic conquest. There's a lot of negotiation in this game, even a card that lets just both players talk it out instead of a battle. Each player has their own alien power that spices up the game and makes it really fun. A lot of the alien powers have large impacts on the game's strategy, so it creates a lot of very different situations and variety in its game that spices it up. There's been a couple games at board game tables where we've just played this game over and over again the whole night. This is crazy fun, but it's not quite S tier. Speaking of, these games are in a league of their own, the best out there. Resistance, or the greatest social deduction game of all time. is about selecting teams where each player on it chooses to fail or succeed in secret. First to 3 wins. There's a lot of ways to clear up or cause confusion in this game that makes it excellent for skilled players. Especially, if you use the one true expansion, the plot cards. Can't play without those. When a fail comes up on a mission, it means there was definitely a spy in the midst. And the hunt is on from there. And the hunt, which feels way better facilitated than any other social deduction game I've played, is what puts this game in the S tier. There's just nothing out there like it. Here I Stand is an asymmetric card-driven wargame where you draw from a common deck and proceed to play them for effects or discard them to command your armies throughout the round. There's a lot more complexity and different varying mechanics in this game, but we do not have the time to go in deep about it. This game handles complexity the greatest I have ever seen. That's what puts it into S tier. Effectively, there are 5 different subsets of rules with a little overlap that creates a different path to victory for each country in the game, while also creating conflict between them. And so you've got a lot of rules, and you break it up into 5 for each of the players that you bring in as the host. But then, there's the Habsburgs, which deals with a lot of the rules and kind of eclipses over the entire game. This game is incredible, and would be the top game here if only it weren't so impossible to get 6 people into a complex game that would take more than 1 session. Root is an asymmetric card-driven wargame. Where have I seen that before? Where each faction has a specific path to gain VP and win. The Cat is a Euro game of production. The Erie are territorial conquest. The Alliance seeks to create a revolution by spreading sympathy and really irritating the previous 2 powers. And the Vagabond seeks to prolong the game as he is a built-in turn timer. It feels quick, your turn order is laid out on your faction card, the artwork is amazing, and the game's balance is fantastic. If Here I Stand is wonderful for being overly complex in its asymmetric wargame, Root is fantastic for being simplistic in its asymmetric wargame. Age of Napoleon. I'm beginning to see a pattern for this. Is a card-driven wargame between the Coalition and France. Each time you lose a troop, it's removed from the game, which makes this a war of attrition where each failure on the board slowly adds up and hurts. I really like this mechanic in this game. The game works with France at an advantage in the first half, but the Coalition becomes stronger in the second. The slow back and forth throughout makes it feel close until either you break through and clearly win, or get a razor-thin victory. Game's a wonderful 2 to 4 hour game night and has never let me down. And the moment you've been waiting for, number 1. Quartermaster 1914 is a 3 versus 2 card-driven war game. I'm not biased.
Card-driven war games are simply superior. This is a 100% objective tier list. What makes them so great is that a lot of interaction is forced with the other player.
Quartermaster takes the traditional wargame in a different direction by only having 1 piece per territory, and instead fully relying on each power's deck to drive the game. This creates a simple but complex game. The decks are fantastic, each feel unique, and by the end of the game, the fatigue of the war sets in as most players only have a few cards remaining. And a lot of forced discards can be a painful choice throughout. The auto win con of a large VP lead prevents players from suffering a lost game, but also rewards highly aggressive play should it work. All of these combine to make the greatest game I've played yet. Additionally, what's cool about the series as a whole is that there's a Quartermaster for each table type. Welcome to Economics of Quartermaster! It's a smart way to make the games, as each one markets itself to a different gaming group size. Most small gaming groups that exist out there have a different amount of people just generally in it, just a small group of close friends. And that concludes the board game tier list. If I talk about more board games on this channel, this will be a handy list to put them on and update to help rate them against all these other games. Thanks for watching. This has certainly been a longer video than I normally make. So if you made it to the end, I'm really happy. I hope to see you again soon.